All right, we did this video last year, and I feel like I am looking fate in the face and just asking for it by doing it again this year. But we're back with it again. Last year, we did a video on how many possible 5-stars Florida State could land. We went through 10 different guys, and Florida State didn't land any 5-stars. Now, they landed several guys that were on that list and several guys who were just outside of being a 5-star, but they actually came away with none. And so doing this again seems like I'm tempting fate, but we're going to try it. Now, as a quick reminder, Luke Kromenhoek finished as the number 33 overall player, so legitimately one spot away from being a 5-star. Cam Davis was highly ranked and fell because he didn't play much senior year. So there were some reasons. Landon Thomas was a 5-star. He didn't go to Georgia, so of course he had to drop. Jonathan Daniels was a 5-star when he committed on 3. He dropped a little bit, still a very highly ranked player. Jamari Howard ended up around the top 50 or so he's just short of a 5-star. Charles Lester got dropped, of course, didn't go to Bama. Can't leave him up there. So Florida State ended with none. However, this year, I think they're going to get more than that. Again, really good class last year for Florida State, all things considered. When they drop all your players at the very end, tough to finish with that 5-star ranking. But this year, can they hold on to the guys they have, and can they add a couple of more? Let's talk about them. Let's talk about everybody that Florida State's targeting, or at least most of the guys Florida State's targeting. This is an exhaustive list, and how many they could realistically get. I made some predictions last year. I don't know if we'll make predictions or not this time, but we'll see what we can get done. Solomon Thomas is a 5-star out of Jacksonville, Florida. He's an offensive lineman, number 15 on the composite, and he's currently committed to Florida State. Obviously, I think Solomon Thomas finishes as a 5-star. He could guarantee that by going to Georgia or Alabama, but I think that even if he sticks with Florida State, he will finish as a 5-star. He's a consensus 5-star everywhere. He's a really good player. The only question for him is, does he stay committed to the Seminoles? UF, LSU, both coming after him incredibly hard. LSU has been talked about to me as maybe the team to beat. That's kind of come out publicly, or the team that could beat Florida State. I think Florida State's still the team to beat because they hold his commitment. And then I know there's a lot of confidence over at UF. I think UF a few months ago thought they were going to flip him in the spring. And then there's still chatter that UF feels really good here. However, Florida State, with the last official visit before he probably ends up shutting it all down, I think the Noles have a good chance to hold on here. Alex Atkins has done a really good job of holding on to guys that ultimately he wanted to hold on to. And there have been others that have gotten away that I think Florida State was okay with parting ways with. Alex has done a good job of bringing much better talent in on that offensive line, both through the portal and through recruiting. And there's some negative recruiting going on because Florida State has used the portal on the offensive line, but when you look at who they're up against, Florida State's offensive line has performed better than either LSU's or UF's over the last couple of years. And so it's a question for Thomas of, do you let that negative recruiting impact you, or do you let the better product impact you? I think Florida State's in a really good position to hold on here, but it will be a battle. Obviously, NIL is going to be factored into every single one of these players. I think Florida State's NIL puts them in a position to compete for anybody. I don't necessarily know that they're losing battles based on NIL, that they're okay with losing, right? Or that they're not okay with losing, right? They're not getting outbid. Do they walk away from the table in some situations? And this isn't about Thomas. Absolutely, right? There's some things that are just not worth it. I think that they can bid for anybody or anything they want at this point, certainly anybody on this list. Javion Hilson's a 4-star out of Cocoa, Florida, the 30th overall player on the composite. He's an edge prospect committed to the Seminoles, flipped from Alabama. If the rankings were done today, being the 30th overall player, he would be a 5-star. Does he maintain that? Does he drop? I mean, if he was to drop 3 spots, he'd end up as a 4-star. But he's got a great chance to finish as a 5-star, currently in that range right now. There's some rumors here as well that, again, Florida's a big one here. Could he flip back to Alabama? There's other schools that are in mind, but Florida State, at least for now, has the edge, has him committed. And if they can keep him committed, that could be your second 5-star. Currently have 2 committed. Probably need to do your best to keep them committed. All right, what about going the other way? Guys that are not committed yet, Let's stick with the Florida theme, as that's been a theme for the first couple. In Vernell Brown III, a 4-star out of Orlando, Florida, the 39th overall player, not currently a 5-star, but if he was to move up one spot on the wide receiver list or anybody else was to fall, that'd probably be enough to get him up into that 5-star range. He's just outside of it right now, again, at the 39th overall player on the composite. It seems like a Florida State battle. It was thought that Ohio State led for a while here, but it seems like Florida State. I've had people tell me they really think Florida State leads in this thing, which I don't necessarily deny. I don't necessarily think that Florida State's not currently in the lead on him. My gut on this is that being a Florida legacy will eventually win itself out. And I would lean UF on Vernell Brown III. I'd love to be wrong there. I'd love to end up getting that wrong. And you guys throw it in my face. I know there's some questions about tensions between his dad and Billy Napier. I've heard some of that, not only the message board chatter, but I've talked to some people that have confirmed that that very likely is the case. However, I don't think Billy Napier is the coach when Florida has their signing day in December, and I think that could be big for Vernell Brown, who is looking for any reason to get to UF. Now, Florida State's set up well here, and they may even lead, according to some different people. But I think it's going to be a long way to go until you can write it down and sign him and ink him in a class. It'll go all the way through to December. You'll never be sure, but that's going to be a tough one to meet. If Florida State could pull it off, it could be a 5-star at the wide receiver position, which they've recruited well, but they certainly could use a superstar type like him. Josh Petty's a 5-star offensive tackle out of Roswell, Georgia, the 32nd overall player on the composite. Really good player that it seems like multiple sources, multiple outlets even, not even sources, have talked about how Florida State leads there and is in a really, really good spot. Now, Florida State's led for other guys. They've had commitments of other guys. And so I know what some of you are going to comment. Well, none of it matters until signing day. And you know what I have to say to that? I don't even know that it matters then. In this time period that we're in right now, how many guys were let out of their NLI, their National Letter of Intent, this January? A lot. More than I've ever seen. Guys not even being made to transfer. You can just leave. If you're going to jump in the transfer portal anyway, you can just leave. So you guys that say it doesn't matter until they sign, let me tell you something. It really doesn't matter until past that, because guys can just be let out of their NLIs. They can transfer after one window. You had guys sign in December and transfer in April, when the window opened. That is, who cares? Who cares about a signature? You're constantly re-recruiting your roster until they fix college football. So yeah, it does matter, or it doesn't, right? It matters all the time or it matters never. And it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? Josh Petty, a 5-star offensive tackle. If you were able to hold on to Solomon Thomas and you could add Josh Petty, you'd have a chance at having the best offensive line class in the country. No matter what else you did, having a couple of 5-stars committed and signed would be very, very impressive. Can Florida State get that done? I don't know, but that would be a huge, huge haul for Alex Atkins. Let's talk about a few more guys, but just before I do that, I want to give some love to my buddy John over at gotspears.com. Right now, he has the craziest deal that I've ever seen him run, and you guys need to go take advantage of it. You can get 2 6-foot spears for $200. That's a total savings of $145. You can also get the 2 6-foot spears that have the torches on the end of them, like mine does, like we've had at the tailgates, like we've had out at any time we're partying for just $300. That's a savings of $195. There are other discounts that you can use, like the Father's Day deal. It's Father's Day 24 and other things on the website right now. But I'm telling you, the 2 6-foot spears for $200 only goes through June. Looking to clear some stuff out, make sure that you go over to gotspears.com. I've never seen this deal before. I don't know that we'll ever see it again, but if you are in the market for a couple of spears, $200 for 2 6-foot spears is about the best deal that I've ever seen him run. All right, let's move on back to possible commits, possible guys Florida State could add. A 4-star linebacker, Tavion Wallace, number 36 on 247 right now. He's 59th on the composite, so he needs to jump up on a couple of sites to get into that 5-star range. But I really like where Florida State sits for this. I know, again, Florida, a big competitor for a lot of guys this year, but I do think Florida State's in a really good spot for Wallace. They'll get his last OV before he ends up announcing in early July, which he just announced. And he's not far. The 6'1", 215-pound linebacker is not far from jumping up into being a 5-star. Tavion Wallace would be somebody like I talked about last year with Jamari Howard, who was right outside of that range. You thought maybe he could jump up to be a 5-star. He didn't. He went the other way a little bit and ended up right outside of that 5-star range, but about as high of a rated 4-star as you could get. That's what I think Tavion Wallace might end up being. Now, if he can jump just a little bit, right? It's 36th on 247, doesn't need to jump up far to get up into a 5-star status. I think he could be another 5-star that you add this year. To me, I think Florida State has a really good chance with Wallace. I think they end up landing his commitment. Not ready to put anything official on the Discord or Patreon just yet. You can go check those out in the description if you need access to those. But I like where FSU sits here. To me, this is, can he make a little bit of a jump to get up into that 5-star range? Zion Grady is a 4-star edge, 6'4", 235, number 66 on the composite. And I think Florida State's doing a pretty good job here. I think I'd have Florida State maybe finishing second here. I don't know that I've seen enough to where I'd say like, oh yeah, they're definitely going to pull him in. I also don't know that I've seen enough for him to think that he is certainly going to end as a 5-star. But at number 66 right now, he really needs to jump up like 2 or 3 edge rushers, and he will be a 5-star. You think about overall rating, 66. I mean, there's probably like what, two or 3, true edges in front of him. If he can jump in front of 2 or 3 guys, he will end as a 5-star. I think FSU has a chance here. They got a lot of work to do, long way to go until signing day in December. But Zion Grady could be another one that you add. Jalen Wiggins is a big one, a 4-star defensive lineman committed to UF right now, but in Tallahassee. Now, he's a little high on the composite, so this one might be a reach. He would have to have an LJ McCray type ascension to, end up as a 5-star, but it's certainly possible. Luke Kromenhoek jumped up way more than this when we did our first video on him, and so I think there's a chance that Wiggins could get there. He would just have to absolutely go off his senior year. 83 on the composite, and again, currently committed to UF, so not a guarantee, not a lock. But I do think Florida State sits in as good of a position as you possibly can for somebody that's committed to your biggest rival. I think that I would put him on flip watch really just for the rest of the year. I don't think that's imminent. I don't think that it's a done deal that Jalen Wiggins flips his commitment from Florida to Florida State. Again, I mentioned earlier, I don't think Billy Napier is the coach when signing day happens. Maybe they can find a way to win 6 games and he shocks me and he still is the coach. Please, I'm as an FSU guy, I'm very good with that. I would love for that to happen. Keep him there as long as is physically possible. But whether he's there or not, I think Florida State's doing an excellent job with Wiggins. Again, I'm not saying that a flip is imminent, but it would not surprise me at all if Jalen Wiggins flipped his commitment to Florida State at some point in this cycle and then ends up signing with the Seminoles. The only thing that I kind of fear about that or being so bold with that is that I do think that, kids that grow up around Tallahassee do want to get out and do want to possibly get to another town, see somewhere else, not stay home. I didn't want to stay home for college. I get that. But if we can overcome that, I think the Noles have a really good chance to pull him in. A couple of 5-star wide receivers that I'll just run through really quickly, just because I know we'll get questions about them. And what I'm going to say is I think 2 of these guys stay 5 stars. 1 probably drops out of the 5-star ranking, but I don't think the Noles get any of them. Khalil Lockett, 5-star wide receiver, number 17 on the composite. Caleb Cunningham's a 5-star wide receiver, number 13 on the composite. And Jamie French, a 5-star wide receiver out of Jacksonville, 18th overall on the composite. I don't think the Noles land any of them. I think they're still in communication. I think they're going to continue to, make the rounds, push as much as you can. You got 1 out of Mississippi. I think it's hard to get kids out of Mississippi. Obviously Cam Akers was one that a brown jacket special back in the day, but I don't think that any of them end up with Florida State. Obviously, I think French, you had a good shot at one time. Things kind of didn't materialize there. He probably ends up in Texas unless somebody else can give him a bigger bag. But I think you go 0 for 3 there. Though I think Lockett, Cunningham, you continue to push pretty hard on French. I think you're kind of there in the background, but I don't foresee you kind of being competitive in that recruitment. I heard Dallas Wilson's a 5-star wide receiver out of Tampa, Florida, the number 24 player on the composite. I think will end as a 5-star. Florida State's got a chance here, right? Committed to Oregon right now, but the Seminoles were pretty sneaky with this, or pretty, creative. Maybe sneaky is not the right word because everybody knows about it, but pretty creative with this. And they do have him visiting the very last weekend before signing day. I think that Tampa to Oregon trip is wild, and it would not shock me if he ended up staying in the state of Florida when it all is said and done, and we get to December. If he sticks with Oregon, certainly a possibility, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he sticks around. Now, I think they've got a long way to go with Dallas Wilson, but having that very last visit right before signing day is intriguing, and it's certainly something to just kind of keep in your mind and keep kind of the thoughts of what that could mean later in the year. Florida State's got 10, 11 wins. They welcome Florida to town. They beat the heck out of Florida in a nighttime crowd, a PM crowd, and you got a 5-star there the last weekend before signing day, which is obviously moved up a little bit. I think that could be really, really big for the Noles. However, long way to go on all of these. How many of these guys does Florida State end up signing? If I had to take a guess right now, I'd probably go with 5, right? Whether that's Wiggins, Wallace, I think they hold on to Thomas, maybe even Solomon as well. Pick up a Brown or Petty. There's 5 of them right there, right? You go 6 for 6 on those 6 that I just mentioned. Wallace, Hilson, Thomas, Vernell Brown, Josh Petty, and who is the other one that we mentioned? Jalen Wiggins. Man, then 6 guys that are in that 5-star range, 6 guys that are like top 80 athletes. You add in a Zion Grady, you add in another talent, maybe one of the 5-star wide receivers that we mentioned. Then I think you're really, really cooking with gas. And the top end, the ceiling of this class bumps up some. Florida State has to finish. Last year, it seemed like they would have 3 or 4 5-stars, and you kind of lost out on all of them on signing day. You had a couple of them flip. You had one of them not flip to you that you thought you were going to get out of, from Ohio State. And then you had one that you were kind of battling for, but probably finished second when it comes down to LJ McCray. Can Florida State finish and lock some of these guys in? Whether they're 4 or 5 stars, some of these guys are going to sign with Florida State. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But how much can Florida State jump, and how much can these guys jump, the ones that are kind of just outside of that 5-star range? We're going to talk about each of their recruitments more in depth, so make sure that you're locked in with the channel. If you missed our last video on what Mike Norvell truly thinks about that timeline changing that we mentioned a few times for the recruiting calendar, you can click the video on the screen right now to check it out. Now that we're done with recruiting and we've talked about that, if you missed any of our ACC content that we've been bringing you with Doug Rohan, you need to go check all that out. You can click on the screen right now to do so.